Yeah.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Chai Together. I am your host and founder, Pratima Day. You are tuning in on Thanksgiving for your cup of courage, hope, and imagination today. Today, I have with me my friend, Joanna. Hi, Joanna.
Hi, how are you today? Happy Thanksgiving, sweetie.
I'm doing good. I have just woken up and I'm ready for this because I like talking to you.
I just like talking, so we're good.
Yeah. Tell everyone about
And
yourself.
hi, everybody. My name is Joanna Kleier. I am the baby of 5 children. My parents were originally from Houston, Texas, and that's why we're very outgoing and friendly. I have 2 children, Mira and Lissa. I'm very proud of them. I've been married for 25 years, and my parents moved out to California when my dad was in the military. He got out on a honorable discharge. He served 13 and a half years. He served in Vietnam and Korea. And I am a proud daughter of Bob and Rita Bricker. They, with their courage and their steadfastness, they had 5 beautiful children. Their oldest boy died at age 7, and they had their faith, God, God, and their belief in God, in a higher power, saved their lives and gave them hope. And so I'm proud to be here. My mom always called me God's gracious gift. I was not planned. I was an accident, but she said I'm not a mistake. And it's definitely for sure. So I'm glad to be here with you, Prativa, and thank you for letting me give my own intro.
Yeah, that's really good. And I wanted to say that's something I said in my summit speech as well, that, you're not a mistake. The fact that you're here, even if people tell you you should have been aborted or, you should have been adopted, all those negative things, that's not right to tell somebody.
That's correct. And I
Yeah.
learned over the years that my mom was said some wise words after her recovery from all the stresses. She was amazing. She had a lot of wisdom, but she said hurting people hurt people a lot, and it's because they're so insecure.
Yeah.
And I had a lot of insecurity, and there's a lot of competition in me. There's a lot of victim feelings. It's passed down, it's generational. I've been learning about that a little bit more, becoming more aware when I'm able to look at my problem, look at myself, and work on myself, and then I have less problems with other people. And so it's just a daily work. It's a daily work of forgiveness and
Wow.
acceptance.
I really like that. What tools are you using?
Well, I am a part of a recovery 12-step group, and I had 30 years of Christianity in my home. And when I got married at 25, I married in the church. And about 6 years after that, when I was about 31 and my first daughter was a toddler, my husband had lost a high school friend to suicide.
Wow.
And after that, my husband was angry with God, and he left the church and he became an atheist.
Wow.
And that was a really hard time for me. Um, of course, Les Brown doesn't want us to say so I'm working on
Yeah.
that. So what I did was I decided to not have God in my home. My husband was very angry at God, and he would say, how does a loving God allow such suffering? And after 30 years of going to church every Saturday, I was a Sabbatarian with all these restrictions and rules and all that. I decided, instead of putting a man's idea of God in my home and separate myself from my husband, which happened a lot when you have unequally yoked partners, I
Mhm.
decided he's a good person. He's the man I married. He's my friend, and I have a child. And my child needs stability because I didn't have stability with my parents. I didn't feel safe with my parents. And so I wanted to make sure I provided a peaceful place for my kids. I saw the destruction that a human idea of God destroyed families. God is not a bad person, he, she, it energy. or whatever you call it. I call it source now because it doesn't have a bad connotation with my religious history. In my recovery, I do say God because it's in its program is a God-centered program, and it was put together by a Christian. So I have been taught growing up to learn, to love, to accept all colors, races, and love everybody because they're all of God. And so there were a lot of good things that came from God. There was a lot of good things that came from the church. There was order and structure that a lot of people don't have, and that's why my father was drawn to it. He left the
I like
military and it
that.
saved his life. It saved his life. God saved his life. His idea of God saved his life.
Your dad,
And
right?
yeah, and I was born 4 years later.
Hmm.
In 1970, he left in 64.
Wow. Before my time.
And he signed the release papers on what day? My birthday,
Wow.
October 17th, 1964. I
So
love numbers now.
yeah, tell me more about your relationship with your parents because you did say you're their gracious child. I want to know more about that.
Okay, well, let's start it off. The story is when my mom told me that she found out that she was pregnant, she was crying on her knees right over the bed. And my dad was out of work. They had just lost their son about 4 years before that, and it was a very stressful time. My father was out of work, and she told me the story that she was praying to God, asking him why she was, why she was pregnant, and I kicked her. And she said, I kicked her, and she's like, okay, I guess she's supposed to be here.
Oh,
And it was awesome for her to have that moment because even when things are going your way, even when you're not expecting it and it happens to you, it's all supposed to happen. It's all supposed to happen. And I was like icing on a chocolate cake, I felt, because by the time they got to me, they were too tired. They had been through World War III in their own world. And I just happened to be a plaything for my three sisters. I
no.
got a lot of attention. So when I don't get attention now, I throw little fits inside. It's really funny. But they came from post-World War II. My father lived in a tent for about 5 years, so he was homeless with
Wow.
his mother was married about 3 times, and they were living with the third stepfather, and it was not a pretty place for him. He never shared detail with me, but a lot of the men didn't come back from World War II. There was a veteran on Veterans Day. I went camping one time not too long ago, and a veteran of World War II came on to speak for us. And he said that there were like 200 men that went over in his unit, and only 26 of them came back.
Wow.
And so there was a lot of loss of good young men. A lot of them were just barely 18. And, they would go over there and they would serve in the war and then they would come back. Like, not very many of them. And so there weren't a lot of father figures for my dad's generation when he was growing up. And there was the Great Depression in 1929. He was born in 1933.
Wow.
And his mother actually had, I think she had alcoholism,
Mm.
and the two fathers after that were all alcoholics. So the ones that stayed here had to deal with post-war stresses and a lot of loss, and they didn't have a lot of material things. My dad, I keep calling him my husband, weird. My dad, um, my dad was 16 when he went into the service.
Wow.
The environment was so bad for him. He hated his birth father, who lived in the same town, never talked to him. And he lived in a tent for 5 years. And he begged his mom to sign him into the military. So he had a place to go. It happened a lot, I have a feeling. I don't know a lot of stories because in painful times like that, they don't want to really talk about it. And then when he lost his son at age 7, He was the firstborn. He had cancer. My brother did. I never met him, and we never talked about him. So it created a lot of stress in our family. And they had their faith, so they always believed that we were going to see Mark again. You know,
You are.
they believed in resurrection, they believed in the Bible, and I was given a set of guidelines because a lot of the younger people didn't have structure. My father did not. Once he got out of the service, saved his life, he had, when I remember him, he had structure. He'd wake up every morning at 4:30. He would pray, get on his knees, study his Bible, and stretch.
I like that.
And then when it got cold, he would wear a hat on his head, and he always told me that the heat will stay in if you wear a hat.
Yeah, it does. It does.
So my parents were not perfect. You know, when my dad came back from Vietnam, Korea, and his childhood traumas, this is where we're going to get into mental health aspect. When he had his traumas.
Yeah, before we get to that, I want to say a lot of families don't talk about those deep-rooted issues, those things, and they get covered up. That's how depression basically begins. Because remember, Bob Proctor says it's depression that causes depression.
Yeah, he said the anger,
Yeah.
which I don't get angry. I get angry with myself. I don't explode, I implode.
Mm.
And it's a good word, imploding or exploding. Those are two great words because it explains the different personality types. Some of us go inward because we don't want to hurt people because we're highly empathetic and we don't like it done to us. That's what I've noticed over the years. And that's what comes with age. With age comes experience. With age comes wisdom. And I'm grateful to be on the earth still because I do suffer from alcoholism and addiction in that way. And it's because of the stress. It's because of the stress that they were victims of their environment.
Yes.
And I'm a victim of mine. But one thing that my parents had, and I'm going to go to gratitude with this one right now.
Yeah.
That even through all the loss, the stress, the abuse that my mom endured, my dad endured as children, as adults, they still came out winners. They came out winners because they had a belief system that they craved and they believed in.
You know, I just want to say how important that is because, you know, I have a similar household with domestic violence growing up, yet they still came out winners. Like you said, they still survived it, even though, I mean, they didn't know any better because their parents didn't teach them any better. But to not, you know, hate your parents because they don't know any better. A lot of people hold that resentment and grudges and anger when they're just not educated enough to know.
Yeah. Well, that's where I think awareness comes in. You also are born of a certain genetic background and disposition. And a lot of this is generational.
Yeah.
The parents before that, during wars, they were lucky they survived all that.
Yeah.
Because back then there's disease. They didn't have the modern technology they have today. They didn't have the drugs to counteract diseases and fight diseases. There's a lot of things involved that people aren't aware of. I'm aware of all this stuff because genetically I'm aware. The way I was born is highly sensitive, very empathetic. I was through the stresses and abuse. I'm highly aware of what's going on around me, almost to the extreme. So that's what I do. I will make stuff up in my emotions and I will think they're real. So reality is your friend, they say. That's the saying. Reality is your friend. And just as I'm in recovery, the first step is acknowledging that your life is insane and that you're doing the same things over and over again. Jack Canfield has an equation. You have an event, you have a reaction, and you have an outcome, right? So I would have an event, I would have a reaction, the same reaction, which create the same outcome, which for me was insanity. So the first step is acknowledging you're insane and that your life has become unmanageable. So that's the first step. When I was in recovery, that I was introduced to step 1, 2, and 3. Number 2 is acknowledging that there's a source outside of yourself that can bring you peace, right? And then number 3 is accepting that there's a higher power greater than yourself. And it's amazing because then you're not holding it in here. I call it a petri dish where there's mold collecting or bacteria, right? We
Wow.
need to give it away outside of ourselves because we're just destroying our temple, which is, in scripturally, it's God's temple is his vessel. It's his instrument of peace, right? So we're always taught all the bad things, but there's a lot of good things. And in our class, Seeking Results, there's polar opposites. I'm aware of those the older I get. It's like, oh, I have a choice. My mom had a book, Happiness is a Choice. I have a choice. I have a choice. There's so many choices we have that we don't realize. So this is life is learning. I call it life is school. And I learned from my mother that you learn from life, you make the best out of it. And
Wow.
I was taught through action that if you get knocked down, you get back up and you keep going. Parents are what I call avatars. They teach us what's right, what's true, what the truth is, but sometimes the truth is not the truth because they're human and they're not thinking right. So thinking into results, and I'm going to say hello to John,
Yeah.
our wonderful mentor, John Tellerico, this morning. Happy Thanksgiving. Thank you so much, John. And thank you so much for bringing me and Pratima together. I'm very grateful for that today.
Oh.
We can share our stories, right? We could share our stories. We could feel in a safe space. We could feel free to tell our truths and to share it with the world. And we're called world changers for that reason, because we have a God-given, source-given energy that's been given to us through our genetics, that I feel that I have a calling to help people. My mother had a calling to help people. My dad had a calling to help people. So it's just generational for me. It's a no-brainer because they would help motherless, fatherless. It's scriptural. Motherless, fatherless, and the elderly. And my mom cared for elderly when I was a baby, when I was young. So I was surrounded by service, and I was surrounded by strength,
Wow.
and I was surrounded by abuse, but it didn't take over the good. It didn't. They were true champions, and I'm grateful for that. I didn't like what I had to go through. I don't like how I'm feeling right now because of what I went through, but there's courage, and to change from within is my slogan. And we're all together for a reason, to make the world a better place. And Les Brown scraped me off the floor. Danette May, my beautiful female mentor, taught me that I can love myself. My intuition is my God, and I have to listen, and I have to trust. And I can trust that because my parents trusted that. They trusted that with all their loss. Look at them, they're gone now, but look at their legacy. Look what they left me.
Yeah, and your mom was beautiful and happy around you.
Oh my God. She goes, I am so glad I had you. She said it to me numerous times.
Wow.
My dad died when I was 28. I found out he was sick when I got married. The day I got married, he was sick. He was not feeling well. 1995, November 25th, 1995.
Wow. I was 3 years old.
Well, you're numerically you're 3, but you're older than that
Oh, yes.
because you have wisdom and you have maturity that is God given to you, you know. So we just gotta be in gratitude, which today's Thanksgiving, and what a perfect time to
Yeah.
meet with you. I haven't talked to you in person before this, and so I'm grateful. All of our spirits are united today. And I remember what Les Brown said, the bottom is crowded.
Yeah.
So let's rise up and bring the people at the bottom who have no awareness and don't know any better. Let's make them aware. Let's make a difference. because through our experiences, they say experiences, strengths, and hopes, we can move mountains. And my parents were survivors. They were resilient. They were my avatars of strength.
Wow.
They also had the polar opposite. They were weak and they were hurting and they hurt each other and they hurt me. And being in truth and being honest is in recovery. Recovery is recovering from the past, acknowledging why you are the way you are, but not letting it define you. And it's not who you are. It's not who you are. Bob Proctor says, I only knew that I was my name before,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
We're not just a name. Our parents named us, and we have these things in us that are just spiritual, God-given energy. And I shut that out a long time ago because my husband was angry at God or his idea of God,
So
but
how,
he doesn't realize there's a good side.
yeah, how is he now with that belief?
He's still an atheist. And so what I do is I respect his atheism.
Mm-hmm.
My parents taught me to respect people, so I respect his atheism. I'm not in control of his life. He has choices, and he's a separate entity than me.
Yes.
Not all clumped together. My parents taught me actually we're all clumped together, we're all one. It's a we, we're one, it's family, And you know, I don't think that's the case. I think we're all individuals. We're born
Yes.
into a family, but we're all individuals. We're not all the same person. They didn't know any better back then. They didn't realize we are independent. We have to love ourselves. They didn't realize that. They thought it was selfish. That's what I think they thought.
Yeah.
I thought I was selfish when I would say me or I. And when I started doing um, when I started doing meditation and visualization, and then I was listening to Les Brown 2 years ago and being in gratitude when I wake up and go into prayer, which I didn't do for years because of God, the
Mm-hmm.
human God people talk about. It's different. See, humans can defile anything. Even alcohol, right?
Yeah.
It was even alcohol in and of itself is not bad. It was created
Mm-hmm.
by people. It is just people abuse it. I had a conversation with my daughter about that yesterday.
Wow.
She said, Mom,
Mm-hmm.
I don't, the what I'm learning, she goes, what I'm learning in science class is that you're not always an alcoholic. You have alcoholism. See, the substances, from what I've learned, just numb your pain,
Yeah.
so you don't feel, it's instant. But the greater work is the recovery down in here. And so the alcohol just numbs you, right, of all your pain, so you don't have to feel. And that's what I've been taught all these years. It's not okay to feel.
Mm.
It's just not okay to feel. Don't, and they tell you when the boys are young, don't cry. Don't
Yeah.
cry. Suck it up. Be a man. And these were just wrong messages.
Yes.
So I talked to my children when they were young, age appropriate. How did that make you feel? I remember one time my husband was yelling at the kids. He must have been yelled at, I think, when he was young.
Mm-hmm.
And I just said to my daughter at the time, he was standing there. I think he got mad at me, but it's okay. I said, are you afraid? Because I saw it in her eyes. I felt it in her reaction, like when your eyes bug out. Well, I had that happen to me when my parents were abusing each other, when they were abusing each other, where you clam up because you're so young and you numb out because you don't know what to do.
Yeah.
So I'm going to be really honest and real and candid, because if we're not honest with ourselves, we can't be true to ourselves and we can't help others.
Yeah. I was
I
just,
used to laugh a lot about painful things until someone made me aware of it.
me too.
So as you work through, as you work through the insanity, as you realize what's going on, that you have the same outcome every time and it's not serving you. I love that word. Danette may use as it, is it serving me? Is it good for me? You have to ask yourself that question. There's another thing that I learned. Keep your side of the street clean. It's a boundary thing,
Yeah.
right? So I'm not responsible for you. You're responsible for you. I was taught with the depression, with the anger, with the violence, I was taught that you have to shame yourself. You have to. You are as, there's a saying, I don't know if you've heard this, but you're as sick as your secrets.
Wow. No, first time. You're as your
See, it's awareness and it's who we hang around. You know, only quality people, they will help you. Only quality people will help you. They won't hurt you. There's a book called Boundaries. After my dad was pulled out of the house from hitting my mom, I think I was probably 15. I feel personally that that was really late in my life to have to see all that and feel all that and go through all that. But now later, I'll go back to that in a minute. But he was pulled out of the house because you know what she said? If you're going to be here with me, and she set a boundary. If you're going to be here with me, you can't do that anymore. She took her power back.
I like that.
That's what we have to do.
Have the courage to say that.
We're too afraid. It's shame. It's shame because we feel bad. And bad about what when we're a kid? It's not our fault. It's not our fault. We don't pick our parents. I said that once before. We don't pick our parents.
No.
We're on the journey we're on for a reason, to help people. No man, there's a saying I heard when I was a kid, no man is an island. It's a song. No man is an island. No man stands alone. Each man's joy is joy to me. Each man's grief is my own. That's a good song. Sorry, I'm off key right now, but that's okay. And it says, we need one another, so I will be fed. Each man's joy is joy to me. And this is all scriptural, but people don't remember the good parts of scripture. They only remember the wars, the killings, and all that we want to focus on, which is not positive. I'm a positive. I was born with genetic predisposition of positivity. Some people are born with a predisposition of the glass is half empty. You know, there's polar opposites. Bob Proctor talks about that, and I learned that with my husband. There's polar opposites. I need that polar opposite to learn about myself. I need opposite to learn about myself. And I over the years when he became an atheist and I decided I want peace in my home because I never had it, I made that choice. Some people will look at it this way because they don't think right. My husband did not hit me like my father did.
Good.
I wouldn't, he knows better. I would not have allowed it. Now he's a serious-minded person and he does have a temper. And he's a lot like my father's personality because that I found out that that's because I'm familiar with that. But I love my dad. My dad, he went through far worse than my mother could ever know. My mother did not go through what he went through.
Wow.
She loved him. That's why she stayed married to him for 41 years. There was good in him. She saw that, and that made her sad to leave or to change anything because she didn't want to hurt him because he had no parents.
Wow.
He was what they call a latchkey kid. They roamed the streets of Houston, Texas. They had no parents that were stable. Alcohol, war, loss, it created a lot of problems for them, for their generation, loss of a lot of people, and they didn't really have a lot, and they were in poverty. So the military and structure changed my dad's life. Structure changed my dad's life. Order. We have to have order. Structure. I mean, every morning. I'm going to share a quick story. I did hospice with him. I
Wow.
got married at 25. He died at 28, and I did hospice with him. I was the baby of 5 children, and I had the gift of being his baby, because guess what? When he was pulled out of the house and my mom got help and he got help and he came back in the house. Not all children can experience this. I did. When he came back in the house and there was no hitting, I decided at 16 years old I was going to face my fears, because they did, right? They did. And I went into his space. My parents had 2 separate rooms. I went into a space in his room, and I decided to go in and get to know him. At the time, I felt safe enough because the hitting had stopped. That there was finally peace in that area. And because there's different types of abuse. There's
Yes.
emotional, mental, and physical. The physical stopped, so I felt safe enough. But I remember going into his room, and I remember feeling chills all the way to my bones, the quick to my bones, because it was violent at times. There were long periods of times where it wasn't violent. But as soon as my dad had stress with the church, then that's when the episodes would happen. So looking back, there's a connection, I think, from my experience. Whenever there's stress, there's a reaction of crazy and abuse.
Yes.
And the stress is what causes disease in the body. And so I would go in and I would tell him I love him, and I would give him a hug, and I would go into his space. I felt safe enough to go into his space. We had worked on a relationship from the age of 16. I had worked on our relationship from the age of 16 till he died
Wow.
at 28 years old. By the time he died, before he died, I had the honor and privilege to be a part of his hospice. Honor and privilege to stand in the kitchen and hear his stories. An honor to hear his sadness. And
Wow.
what he did was bad at times. What he did was bad at times. And he abused my siblings too. And so he shared his sadness. He was in the military, and I have military police. Back in the day, they did not have any houses to go to, any refuge, or any kind of services for women to go to for help. And who wants to go back to your family of origin, your parents, when you're having stresses in your own new home, right? So he said, the police came. He goes a few times, and he goes, they should have taken me away. I deserved to go there. He was in his last days of life, and he was making amends to me in the kitchen. He wrote my sister's letters apologizing.
Wow.
He went into counseling, and he told me his darkest days. He told me what he did to his own son in PTSD and alcoholism and blackouts. And he shared his darkest, stressful times with me. And he's sobbing and crying. And we had precious moments of that. And my siblings didn't have that because they left home either to go to college or get married. And so I was the baby, and I decided when I was very young to face my fears when I was 16, because my parents decided to face their fears. And I was able to have a relationship with my dad because I decided to. It was scary. If I went too long periods without talking to my father, I felt like I had to start all over again. And even to this day, even after being gone 21 years, 22 years, I still have the baggage from his violence within me and my lack of disregard and lack of respect towards men because of my father's violence. Because of his violence, it's affected my relationship with men. They're this big thing. When he was sick and dying, I got my own counselor, my own therapist because I didn't know what to do and I was reeling. And she talked me through it. She talked me through it. It helped. One time my husband came home. She told me to try this. It was like a visual picture. She said, when your husband comes home, which is equivalent to my father coming home, there's parallels in how I respond because there was violence. I respond with a knee-jerk reaction. And she told me with a visual picture, you need to tell your mind. Don't tell your husband, tell your mind. He is not that big. When I'm a kid, I have no choice over what's going on around me. When I was a kid, I have a choice now that I'm an adult. My parents were hurting people that came from hurt. So they hurt each other. But once they got help, they learned that they couldn't hurt each other anymore. The Boundaries book by Henry Clouden Townsend is a great book. She suggested it to me. Happiness is a Choice is a good book. When you're down at your bottom, when you're at the lowest point, she suggested Boundaries. I didn't listen to Boundaries till last year, the last year and a half. It was in here. She's like, listen to it. She was suggesting it. So I
Yeah.
finally listened to it. There was one, even through all the stress, we still have choices. We are a free moral agent, is what I heard when I was a kid. We have free will, which I learned when I was older. My husband loves philosophy, so we had a lot of discussions about it. And we have the ability to have a boundary. And the boundary is, in a very simple state, is only letting good in and keeping the bad out.
I like that.
Henry Townsend and Cloud, they opened up a bunch of facilities for mental health,
Oh, wow.
for addiction, and they put together psychologists, psychiatrists together to help people. And they opened several homes for people,
That's really
facilities.
necessary. Recently, a nurse told me there's not enough psychiatric support in the world, like in the States in general.
Yeah, well, you know what? It's hard because a psychiatrist only gives out, they give out medication.
Mm.
I've taken several medications. I guess we'll go to the mental health aspect here.
Mm-hmm. I just want to share, there's this book, Transform Your Boundaries, and Sari Gilman. It's a TED Talk. Do you know it?
No, I don't, but that's awesome. I love the title.
Yeah. And I started reading it, and there's activities you can do. So boundaries, I just learned about this year too. It's really necessary because I didn't have any, right? I was stepped on. When I stood up for my boundaries, they stepped on me. So I never, even when I had a voice, I was quieted. That's why I never learned healthy boundaries. Yeah.
Well, they were so afraid. I think when I'm in recovery, I learn fear, false evidence appearing real.
Real. Yeah.
We need to make sure that we teach people the truth. The truth shall set you free.
Yeah.
Intuition is God talking to us.
Yes. From the lesson. Yeah.
They call it, they call it, they call it several things, the Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
They call it subconscious mind. They call it different things. I don't care what you call it.
I wanna bring you back for a second and third interview to get into.
Okay, that sounds awesome. Let's do it.
Yeah,
Part
let's do
one.
that.
I'm sorry, I went on and on, but
No, your story is really
we have a lot.
beautiful.
I have so many stories.
It's a
You don't.
story of love, healing, religion, and just your journey overall.
Well, I went through Old Covenant, which was just like Jewish Seventh-day Adventist,
Mm-hmm.
Judeo-Christian, to Christianity. When I was 18, the church's founder died. I went from Old Covenant to New Covenant to Grace. 6 years married. My husband became an atheist, so I had atheism. And I've been through a lot of stresses. But one of our lessons, we write down, there's a step 4 where you write down your character defects, your flaws. We do that in our program with thinking and results. We write down the bad things, old paradigms. We write them down and we burn them.
Yes, we did that.
I did that. We did that. And how did you, I have a question for you.
Yeah,
How did you feel after you burned it?
good.
Did you feel like you can move forward?
Yes.
Good.
Yeah, I actually burned it inside, which is not a great idea. It smelled like
I burnt my turkey. I tried to barbecue it yesterday.
Yeah.
The skin burnt, so now it's in the oven today.
Is it still there, the smell?
It's 3 hours. Well, it's not smelling yet because it's not cooked. But guess what? When I was on one of my first dates, my anniversary was yesterday, 25 years. When I
Oh,
was on one of my first dates, I made barbecue chicken and I put the sauce on too soon and it burnt the chicken. My husband comes home from work yesterday and he's like, guess what? This reminds me of our first date when you burnt the chicken. I burnt the turkey. Burnt the outside of the turkey.
You're so fun.
You know what? I tell you what, life is a joke and then you become one. I used to be depressed about it, but it's just anger gone inward. It's just anger and ghosts and unresolved issues gone inward, and then we hurt ourselves.
That's really
it's self-deprecation.
It's as simple as that. It's really that simple. It's you, like you are the issue.
Yeah,
so simple.
Yeah, it is. It begins, remember that kid song? It begins with me.
No.
I don't know. There was a lot of wisdom out there.
Yeah.
There's a lot of wisdom out there. And they tell us in our program of thinking the results, Bob Proctor teaching.
Tell everyone where they can find you, Joe.
They can find me on Facebook, Joanna Bricker Kleier, which Bricker is my middle name, my maiden name, Joanna Bricker Kleier. And I'm on Facebook. I have several, thank you. I have several Facebook like groups based upon the subject matter and based upon the different types of groups of people that are struggling with these different things. So I have a lot of subcategories because there's so many facets in life. I'm on Twitter, I'm on Facebook, I'm on, what's the other one? Oh, Instagram. Joanna Kleier Instagram. I blast myself all over the medias for free all the time. And they have this thing called a fan out with my work called a fan out. They call it a fan out where something goes wrong and then everybody calls each store. Well, our social media is a fan out. It is a super highway.
Yeah.
And it's awesome because we can connect to people, places, things, situations that can help us.
Yes.
There's Google. I ask Google questions all the time.
Me too.
I have a 12-pound turkey. How much time do I put it in for?
Yeah, just a quick thought that, you know, how I survived, one of the reasons is through education, like researching, why am I feeling this way? Is this normal? What is anxiety? What is body dysmorphia? I healed myself through Google.
And they tell us, I was on a call with Ian, our accountability partner, Ian.
Yeah.
I'm going to talk to him later today.
He's so sweet.
He gave me a free session. Ian Harvey. He gave me a free session 3 weeks ago. He goes, I'll give you another free one in 3 weeks. And that's today.
Oh, Thanksgiving.
My favorite week of all times. And we'll go in part 2. We'll talk about my last job location, and we'll talk about
Yes,
what I
I
learned
would
from
like
that.
to. Thank
Yeah.
you for being here.
Thank you for having me, and
Happy
thank you for your
Thanksgiving.
lead. Happy Thanksgiving. You're a great leader. You're a world changer.
Oh,
I
I
never heard those two words. Yes, you are.
I am.
You
Own
are. Say,
yourself.
say, I am a world changer.
I am a world changer.
Yes. Our brains will change with I am statements. I learned that from Danette May.
Yes, I am and I can. Tarnia Coley. We're so
That's
funny.
right.
All of
Yeah,
our
actually,
whole circle.
scientifically, it's proven in science, I am statements will change the wiring of your brain,
Yes.
and gratitude as well. So that's why
Yes.
they have us do a gratitude list every morning. If you do it 3 days in a row, you'll notice the shift in your feelings, your thoughts, and your actions. It's great.
Yeah.
That's what I learned through experience. So
It works. I do it too.
thank you so much.
Oh,
Good for you. I'm grateful you were born with wisdom.
oh, me
It's
too.
awesome.
The world would be deprived.
This is in loving memory of Richard Nixon.
Oh.